In 1492, the ships of Christopher Columbus drifted in the Sargasso Sea when suddenly something terrible began to unfold around them. This moment marked the beginning of numerous questions. Was Columbus the first European to encounter strange phenomena in the New World? Since the disappearance of the vessel number 19 without a trace along with its crew, reports of strange occurrences continue to emerge from this area to this day. Pilots and fishermen report mysterious encounters, possibly with aliens from outer space. Where lies the solution to the mystery hidden under the name Bermuda Triangle? Many today perceive the Bermuda Triangle problem as superstition or fabrication. However, eyewitness accounts confirm that things are happening in this region that are beyond our understanding. For many, the Bermuda Triangle remains merely a geometric figure in the middle of the Atlantic, with its vertices in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Bermuda Archipelago. What makes this part of the ocean different from others? According to calculations by scientists studying the Bermuda Triangle issue, since 1945, more than 1,000 disappearances have been recorded there. Not only fishermen have vanished, but also cruisers, private planes, and passenger liners with both passengers and crews disappearing along with them. Richard Weiner, the author of the book The Devil's Triangle, notes that the greatest mystery of this area is the disappearance of the naval vessel USS Cyclops. This steamship, 150 meters long and displacing 19,000 tons, vanished during World War I, when many ships were using coal and diesel vessels were scarce. On board were 300 sailors and officers heading from British Barbados to Norfolk, Virginia. Both the ship and its crew disappeared without a trace. Some blame the weather, as sudden squalls, not uncommon in these parts, can sink a ship or aircraft in mere seconds. However, others believe that far more sinister forces are at play in this area. Dr. Charles Berlitz, the author of the book The Bermuda Triangle, spent years investigating nearly all theories explaining the disappearance of ships and planes in this region. Columbus's report mentions that he was the first person to observe strange objects in the night sky over the Sargasso Sea. We can only speculate about the nameless horror that gripped his brave companions, lost amid an unexplored and eerie world. In Columbus's ship's log, the same mysterious phenomena are described that continue to terrorize pilots and sailors who dare to venture into the Bermuda Triangle. The inhabitants of the Caribbean and Puerto Rican islands reported to Columbus that such phenomena are not uncommon in these areas. Their legends constantly mention celestial gods and green fireboats that fly in the sky and swim underwater. The personal experiences of some researchers also confirm strange events. One of them shares, "Personally, I had almost no contact with the forces of the Devil's Triangle. Only once did it seem to me that I saw a lighthouse where there was none." Nevertheless, he knows people who have encountered these forces face to face. They have seen green glows emanating from the sky to the water and disappearing into the abyss, claiming that it was an Ilo. All these stories pale in comparison to the most chilling aspects of the Bermuda Triangle. The mysterious disappearances, the lists of missing ships, and the abandoned vessels that have dissolved into the sky. Each of these events serves as a reminder of the human lives behind them. The most famous case of an airplane's disappearance occurred shortly after World War II, when 5 aircraft of the United States Navy vanished. Many believe that this was not without the involvement of UFOs. This happened on the 5th of September, 1945. Squadron 19 took off for a training flight at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with 5 pilots and 10 crew members on board. The commander was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced combat pilot with vast experience. The planes were supposed to describe a triangle over the sea and return to base after 2 hours. After completing the first leg of the flight, Squadron 19 turned north, and then the pilots began to experience instrument malfunctions. A voice crackled over the airwaves. "My instruments are crazy," another pilot confirmed. "I have the same thing." "Where are we?" Flight instructor Lieutenant Robert Cox heard these communications, but for some reason, the pilots did not hear him. Cox called the base, and it turned out that they had completely lost contact with Squadron 19. Preparations for rescue operations began immediately. Radio operators on the coast continued to receive signals from the lost aircraft until the very evening. Then Lieutenant Taylor's last words were heard over the air. "Don't look for us, they look like..." What did Taylor see? Why did he decide that they were not worth saving? According to Dr. Charles Berlitz, the rescue team had already taken to the air by that time. But here a new tragedy occurred. The gigantic Martin Mariner with 13 crew members on board disappeared from radar screens. Flight 19 and the Martin Mariner, along with 28 people, vanished without a trace, as if they had passed through some door into another dimension. Dr. Berlitz claims that a special commission attributed these disappearances to faulty instruments, which caused the planes to run out of fuel and crash into the open sea. However, it is unlikely that the instruments could fail on 6 planes simultaneously. Berlitz also mentions that one of the commission members jokingly remarked that Flight 19 seemed to have flown to Mars. Perhaps he was not so far from the truth. In any case, the inhabitants of the southern corner of the Bermuda Triangle would not be surprised even by a Martian. Some scientists believe that aliens from outer space have chosen this area as their base. Could this be where the mystery of the disappearances lies? No one denies that unexplained things happen in the Bermuda Triangle. But how are UFOs connected to this? And how does their activity in this area differ from activity in other corners of the planet? Robert Denning, a researcher and scientific analyst, notes that UFO activity has been observed in Puerto Rico for a long time. There are many photographs showing UFOs emerging from the water and diving back near the coast, especially around the American base Roosevelt Roads. The military tries to keep quiet about this, but you cannot hide a needle in a haystack. In Puerto Rico, there is a beautiful mountain named El Huenze. For unknown reasons, UFOs seem to swirl around it. Denning and his friend, the well-known researcher N. Block, visited this mountain. And what did they discover? There were plenty of guards from Walking Hat Security, an organization that protects bases such as Groom Lake, Area 51, Dreamland, and Nellis in Nevada. So what were they doing at the top of El Huenze in Puerto Rico? Cases of alien abduction have also been reported in Puerto Rico. How are they connected to similar incidents in other parts of the Bermuda Triangle? In this area, people have long been accustomed to aliens and cases of abduction. Reports of UFOs in the shape of discs that move at the same speed in water and in the air are frequent. Richard Weiner, in his book The Devil's Triangle, recounts an incident involving the underwater activity of UFOs. Boat driver John Carpenter managed to witness a breathtaking sight. He observed 2 UFOs exploring the water using some kind of energy beams. Similar observations have already been reported by witnesses. He suggests that UFOs may be frequently observed in this area because they might have a base there. Some scientists believe that aliens have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, and some even suggest that they established a colony here. According to an ancient legend, Atlantis disappeared as a result of a natural cataclysm and has been resting on the seabed for 12,000 years. It is possible that it truly was a colony of extraterrestrials. McCall wonders whether aliens are studying humans by observing them from the depths of the ocean, and whether they sometimes need samples for research. He suggests that the abducted may be held in some underground hangars, although this is not necessarily the case. They could be kept in places that merely look like underground hangars. Some of the victims insist that American military personnel were involved in their abduction. This may be true, but it is also possible that the abductors simply disguised themselves as American military personnel to confuse their victims. In the Bermuda Triangle, not only light or energy beams are observed, but sometimes strange phenomena are accompanied by fog or haze. Einstein claimed that the Bermuda Triangle is a doorway to another space-time dimension. Perhaps the key to this door is aboard a UFO. George Winfield, the editor of the magazine Star Watcher, notes that they are dealing with interdimensional phenomena. Research on these phenomena has been ongoing since 1947, but they have a much older history. The UFO phenomenon is very complex and consists of several aspects. Journalist and researcher George Schnipp raises the question of where UFOs come from. He notes that there is no definitive answer to this question. Some believe that aliens come from other dimensions, others refer to parallel universes, while others believe that it is us ourselves, just arriving from a distant future. Schnipp is also curious if there are witnesses who have been beyond this barrier and returned. According to experts, the continuously growing number of reports indicates that thousands of people have been aboard UFOs. These messages resonate with cases of abductions in the Bermuda Triangle. The appearance of UFOs in this area is often accompanied by sightings of energy beams, and some witnesses also report a greenish fog. Charles Berlitz recounts the case of Chuck Wakely, a pilot from Miami. After completing a charter flight to Nassau, he was returning to Miami when the sky was suddenly enveloped by a glowing greenish fog, so dense that visibility was lost. Wakely noted that his instruments stopped working, and he was forced to disconnect from control. Soon, the fog disappeared and the flight continued normally. Disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle may be linked to abductions. Let us consider the case of Flight 401 of National Airlines. The crew requested a temporary check-in in Miami, and the clocks on the control panel were in perfect order. The airplane was following the schedule exactly. Later, the second pilot recalled that at that moment the cockpit was shrouded in a greenish fog, but otherwise everything was fine. However, at Miami Airport, the aircraft 727 suddenly disappeared from the screen. The dispatcher immediately declared an alarm, and within a minute the Coast Guard was put on alert while the airport prepared for the worst. The flight attendant was surprised that she managed to complete a task that usually takes 10 to 12 minutes in just 3 minutes. The second pilot noticed that the green fog around the airplane suddenly vanished, and the sky became absolutely clear. Exactly 10 minutes after the disappearance of Flight 727, it reappeared on the screen. Later investigations showed that the onboard equipment was in perfect order. Flight 727 safely landed in Miami. The crew watched in bewilderment as the rescue equipment was ready for action. The pilots could not believe that the airplane had been delayed by 10 minutes. When they began to synchronize their watches, it turned out that everyone on board had watches that were exactly 10 minutes slow. What is the green fog? Could it be a doorway to another dimension? Captain Don Henry, who was returning from Puerto Rico with 25,000 tons of cargo, knows this better than anyone else. That day, the weather was wonderful, and he was resting in his cabin when suddenly the electricity began to malfunction. They checked everything: generators, switches, breakers, everything was in order. However, something strange was happening on deck. The entire barge was enveloped in some fog. Deciding to check what was going on, the captain went down and encountered the unimaginable. With 25 years of sailing experience, he had never seen such strange squalls. Suddenly, all the instruments failed. The compass, the radio, the radar, everything went to hell. At first, they were only afraid for the cargo, but soon fear gripped them for their own lives as well. Despite the powerful diesel engines, the barge could not move an inch. Something was holding them back. When the squall finally subsided, they set the autopilot and went to inspect the damage. On the deck, the captain saw something that sent chills down his spine. Their rope was simply hanging in the air, and there was nothing at the other end. When they pulled it out, it turned out to be hot, and its end was neither frayed nor broken, but rather as if it had been severed. An anomalous force was clearly felt in the air, and the fastenings could burn you. Captain Henry believes they were lucky to return home alive. The rope was just hanging in the air, and the barge with the cargo, according to him, seemed to have evaporated. Could this be related to aliens? This assumption might explain the strange events in the Bermuda Triangle. It is likely that the missing ships and airplanes were captured by UFOs. But perhaps there are other explanations. Maybe the disappearances are due to trivial natural phenomena or something more terrible than UFOs. While studying the Bermuda Triangle, researchers are gathering more and more evidence pointing to possible alien involvement in the disappearances. But is this really the case? Some areas of the ocean seem to possess the ability to quickly absorb objects. Strange, but true. Not a single piece of wreckage from the ships and airplanes that have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle has been found to this day. Some claim that these vessels were needed by the abductors intact and unharmed. Once a year, someone inevitably reports the discovery of wreckage from missing bombers. The last time it was rescuers from Fort Lauderdale who claimed to have found 3 or 4 airplanes that were supposedly part of Flight 19. However, after conducting a small investigation, Captain Henry discovered that after the war, many such airplanes had accumulated at the Fort Lauderdale base, which were often dismantled for parts for other machines. To dispose of the wreckage, they were loaded onto ships and dumped overboard into the open sea. He believes that the found airplanes ended up in the ocean in this manner, but if aliens are indeed capturing vessels, then why does this happen only in one place on the planet? Strange things happen not only in the Bermuda Triangle. A similar place exists off the eastern coast of Japan, known as the Devil's Sea. If one were to drill a well through the Earth's core in the center of the Bermuda Triangle, one would ultimately find oneself in the Devil's Sea. By the way, only in these 2 places does the compass point to geographic north rather than magnetic north, as it does in the rest of the world. Does this mean that we are close to unraveling the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle? Dr. David Jacobs, author of the book UFOs: The Problem in America, notes that, unfortunately, we still do not know much. Many facts have been accumulated, but this issue has always remained closed. The question of the purpose of abductions remains open. However, researchers are confident that they are close to a solution. In recent years, a wealth of information and facts has poured in, allowing for significant progress in understanding this phenomenon. One of the researchers states, "I believe that in the coming years we will solve not only the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle but also UFOs in general. Thousands of missing ships and airplanes have left no traces on Earth. Perhaps one day it will be revealed who is behind the mysterious disappearances and anomalous phenomena occurring in this part of the world's oceans. But for now, the eerie phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle remains an unsolved mystery in the pages of UFO diaries." Some scientists hypothesize that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built long before the first pharaohs. The question of the sacred granite slabs located at its heart remains open. Who and why placed them there? Researchers suggest that the pyramids of Giza may have served as beacons for extraterrestrials, guiding them to a spaceport in the Sinai Desert, to a corridor, the end of the cosmic desert. Recent discoveries in the field of astronautics confirm the existence of a connection between Egyptian and Martian pyramids. Perhaps our true homeland is Mars. Ufologists believe that the keys to the mysteries of the great and Egyptian pyramids can be found in space, and the ancient Egyptians were aware of this. Debates about the Egyptian pyramids have been ongoing for thousands of years. Neither ancient nor modern scholars can come to a consensus on how and by whom they were built, and most importantly, why. According to the official version, these are tombs for pharaohs, built by Egyptians around 2,500 years before our era, during the 4th dynasty. However, this version raises doubts among many. Some scholars believe that the ancient Egyptians could not have constructed such massive structures. If it was not them, then who could it be? Archaeologists assert that 4,000 years ago, the Egyptians not only revered the sun, but also believed in celestial beings who descended to Earth to impart knowledge to humanity. Perhaps these heavenly entities were somehow connected to the pyramids. Questions regarding the relationship between the pyramids and recent discoveries on neighboring planets remain unanswered. Could it be that a single architect stands behind all these structures, and if so, will the ancient pyramids help solve the mystery of humanity's emergence on Earth? For now, these questions remain merely questions. In the absence of concrete evidence, the pyramids at the edge of the Egyptian desert remain nothing more than 3 enormous piles of stones. The largest among them are the pyramids of Khufu, or simply the Great Pyramid. Modern scholars believe that, from the standpoint of mathematics, physics, and common sense, the Egyptians could not have constructed this Great Pyramid of Khufu. And yet, it stands before us, 42 stories high, covering an area equivalent to 10 football fields, skillfully assembled from stone blocks weighing between 2 and 10 tons. With such a quantity of stone, one could build 35 buildings the size of the Empire State Building, with enough left over for a couple of 9-story buildings. The pyramid is oriented strictly to the north and possesses a unique architecture. How could the ancient Egyptians, with their primitive tools, construct such a complex structure? Perhaps we simply know nothing about the true builders of the pyramid. For a long time, all textbooks repeated the version of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, who, in the 5th century BCE, after visiting Egypt, wrote that the Great Pyramid was built over 20 years by alternating teams of 300 slaves. But is this really the case? Engineer Ron Charles emphasizes, to build such a behemoth in 20 years, you would need to lay under 10 tons of stone every 3 to 5 minutes, and this around the clock. Today, we do not have such technologies. But laying stones is only part of the problem. How did the Egyptians manage to transport the enormous stone blocks from the quarry to the pyramid construction site? Chuck Missler, an engineer and astronomer, points to the popular cinematic version that claims the pyramids were built by hundreds of thousands of slaves. He calls this theory absurd. Nothing more foolish could possibly be conceived. David Tulin, the author of the book Sign and Witness, adds that the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty were not known for their militarism, and even if that were not the case, they would not have been able to gather such a number of slaves. With such a shortage of labor, it was impossible for the Egyptians to build the pyramids, even using complex devices for transporting stone, he claims. Moreover, Egyptologists still do not know exactly what devices were used. Among scholars, there are two main camps. Some believe that rollers were used for construction, while others believe that inclined ramps were utilized. Greg Ray Pyros, an architect, notes that proponents of the ramps argue that stones were lifted up an inclined ramp 1,500 meters long. However, he emphasizes that building such a ramp would have been much more complicated than constructing the pyramid itself. And then, how did the Egyptians manage to dispose of 2,500 tons of construction debris? Pyros questions. He also considers the theory that the Egyptians might have placed logs under the blocks. This theory looks good, especially if one does not take into account some vital factors, he says, pointing out that at that time only date palms were growing in Egypt, which served as a source of food, and the Egyptians were unlikely to have cut them down. Furthermore, delivering 25 million logs would have required a fleet that Egypt never possessed. It is absolutely impossible to transport blocks on wooden rollers along a stone road, he adds, emphasizing that with such weight of the blocks, nothing would have remained a couple of hundred meters from the rollers. Despite this, traditional explanations for the origin of the pyramids have remained unchanged for centuries. Perhaps it is time for this now? Pyros wonders, noting the clear discrepancy between theories and facts. During the time of the pyramid construction, sciences such as geology, mathematics, and astronomy were flourishing. Our technologies do not allow us to build anything like this, says Greg Nelson, author of the book The Power of the Pyramids. He does not rule out the possibility that other civilizations, perhaps even beings from other solar systems and galaxies, assisted the Egyptians in building the pyramids. If the pyramid was built by some alien race of cosmic wanderers, then what is the purpose of these giants? Nelson questions. Some scholars believe that the answer lies in the foundation and orientation of the pyramid. It is unlikely that the Egyptians knew about geology what we know today, he notes, emphasizing that it is unclear how they managed to construct such a massive structure without an appropriate foundation. In theory, it should have sunk into the ground, he adds, pointing out that modern engineers allow for a settlement of 15 centimeters for multi-story buildings over 100 years, while the Great Pyramid, weighing 5.5 tons, has settled only 4 centimeters over 5,000 years. This engineering marvel indicates that unknown architects not only wanted the pyramid to stand forever, but also knew how to achieve that. Moreover, modern engineers are astonished by the fact that ancient predecessors managed to make the walls perfectly even. In modern construction, a deviation of 25 centimeters over 12 meters is considered a tremendous achievement, while the walls of the Great Pyramid are built with a deviation of about half a centimeter. According to Goni Gond, the author of the book Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid, modern technologies are unable to provide the same level of precision that was achieved by the builders of the Great Pyramid. These ancient architects possessed phenomenal knowledge of astronomy. They understood the duration of days and years, knew the times of the equinoxes, and realized that the Earth has a spherical shape, which allowed them to calculate latitude and longitude. Anthony Hilder, a writer and theorist, emphasizes the astonishing geographical orientation of the Great Pyramid in Giza. Its walls are strictly aligned from north to south and from east to west, with deviations from true north of only 3 minutes. Hilder wonders how the inhabitants of the ancient world were able to calculate true north while Europeans debated for centuries whether our planet is flat. Egyptians, or their mentors, were already calculating latitude and longitude on the spherical surface of the Earth freely 4,000 years ago. Richard Hoagland, the author of the book Martian Monuments, claims that two recent scientific discoveries refute traditional notions that the Egyptian pyramids served as tombs for pharaohs. The first discovery concerns radioactive and radiocarbon samples that showed that the apex of the pyramid is several thousand years older than its base. The second discovery is related to radioactive sand found in the center of the pyramid, in the chambers behind the royal burial chamber. These two facts, according to Hoagland, explain each other well and may indicate the presence of technologies that were familiar to the builders of the Great Pyramid. There are also speculations about interplanetary travel and the presence of extraterrestrials. Some scholars express the opinion that a powerful black energy operates within the Great Pyramid, which they refer to as the Curse of the Pharaohs. David Davis, a writer and historian, notes that the Curse of the Pharaohs first affected two Englishmen, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon, who in 1920 explored the tomb of Tutankhamun. Among the artifacts, they found a tablet with a curse warning against disturbing the pharaoh's rest. Although this did not frighten the scholars, their local assistants might have panicked and fled, hiding the tablet. However, shortly after this, 36 people involved in the excavations died. Carnarvon and Carter were about to open the mummy when the former suddenly fell ill and soon died from an unknown disease. At the moment of his death, electricity went out across all of Cairo. The American Carter Mace, who removed the last piece of wall blocking the entrance to the tomb, also died with the same symptoms, fever and coma. After Carter showed his friend George Good the tomb, the latter woke up with a fever and soon passed away. Archibald Douglas, who first conducted an X-ray examination of the mummy, died aboard a ship returning to England. Researchers of the phenomenon of the Curse of the Pharaohs claim that the renowned doctor and biologist Izzuddin Taga discovered an ancient microscopic fungus in the tomb that could have lain there for thousands of years. He claimed that the fungus is easily destroyed by antibiotics, but a tragic car accident prevented him from proving his point. If the pyramids were indeed built by some super civilization, perhaps this fungus was left as a protection against intruders. Maybe the builders of the pyramids did not want to allow Earthlings access to their secrets. What sinister secrets does the Great Pyramid conceal? Some researchers suggest that the giant granite slabs above the royal tomb could serve strange functions. Do they work today? Perhaps this is the key to unraveling the mystery of the pyramids. It is known that the builders of the Great Pyramid in Giza anticipated that it would stand forever. Archaeologists assert that the pyramid was originally covered with a protective layer of stones that made the walls smooth and sloping. This layer was removed and used for building houses in Cairo, but the pyramid itself remained untouched. There is evidence that the Great Pyramid, unlike other structures, does not sink into the ground. It is also known about the Curse of the Pharaohs, a certain force that kills anyone who approaches ancient secrets too closely. It is obvious that the builders of the pyramid did not want to allow any intrusion into its depths. But why? Perhaps they planned to make use of it again someday. In the early 1950s, scientists began to explore the vast library of clay tablets found in the ruins of a storage facility in Nineveh. Science knows of no older records. One of the texts describes something resembling the Egyptian pyramids. The Sumerian tablets are believed to be 10,000 years older than the Egyptian ones, which are thought to have built the pyramids. If the translation is to be believed, the pyramids stood in the desert long before the first pharaohs appeared. If this is true, the key to the ancient pyramids may lie within these tablets. Dr. Zecharia Sitchin, the author of the book Stairway to Heaven, has studied the mysteries of the Sumerian texts for many years. Based on these texts, it can be suggested that the pyramids of Giza served as beacons for alien ships, guiding them to a spaceport in the Sinai Desert. This is quite an exotic hypothesis, but how could aliens have used these beacons? With all their sizes, they are impossible to distinguish from space. Kenneth McCulloch, the author of the book Man as a Citizen of the Universe, puts forward an interesting theory. He believes that a certain energy beam emanates from the top of the pyramid, which increases in diameter as it rises. According to this theory, the pyramids, unlike simple stone mounds, emit energy. But what distinguishes them from the latter? Roger Oakland, a writer and science popularizer, explains that the pyramids have a crystalline structure and are therefore sensitive to wave energy and even cosmic microwaves. Above the royal tomb and the Great Pyramid in Giza are 5 granite slabs that the Egyptians referred to as stones of the spirits. These slabs may serve as a gigantic receiver aimed at some area of the universe. Inside the pyramid, an energy beam bursts forth, expanding in diameter as it moves away from the Earth. This phenomenon was first noticed by the English inventor Sir Simmons. When he was about to drink wine from a bottle, he suddenly felt a slight electric discharge. This surprised Simmons, and he wrapped the bottle in a wet newspaper, turning it into a simple battery known as a Leyden jar. Thus, the Great Pyramid may be a gigantic energy accumulator, but it is unknown what it is intended for. The only authoritative figure asserting that radioactive sand was found in the pyramid remains Dr. Ibram Nevgavi. In 1987, he attended an archaeological conference in Tennessee, where his friend claimed that he had heard from him about radioactive sand in the heart of the Great Pyramid. This suggests that it was not a primitive civilization that worked there, but rather someone very advanced. Thus, the ancient Sumerian texts may describe the true purposes of the pyramids as beacons for cosmic wanderers. It sounds incredible, but this is the first hypothesis that explains all the peculiarities of the Great Pyramid, its location, construction, and design. However, are there other arguments in favor of extraterrestrial builders of the pyramids? In Sumerian texts, Earth is mentioned as the 7th planet, which may indicate that the Sumerians considered the planets not from the Sun, but from the outer edge of our solar system. However, Neptune and Pluto were discovered only in the 20th century, while these texts were written 10,000 years ago. The question arises, how could the Sumerians know that Earth was indeed the 7th planet? According to researcher Zecharia Sitchin, only someone who flew past Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars could refer to Earth in this way. This raises an interesting question about the possible influence of aliens on ancient civilizations, including the authorship of the Great Pyramid. Recent space explorations have shown that the pyramids on the surface of Mars are strikingly similar to the Egyptian ones. This discovery leads to reflections on whether this colossal structure was indeed built by aliens for some purpose known to them. Humanity is beginning to explore the boundaries of the solar system. However, it remains unclear whether these discoveries will lead to the unraveling of the mystery of the pyramids or, on the contrary, further confuse scientists. The fundamental mathematical laws embedded in the structures on Mars repeat the constructions in Giza, including the positioning of the Sphinx. The latitude at which Giza is located is directly related to the latitude of Martian Cydonia. We do not know who built these structures, but the answer may lie in a humanoid face, 1.5 kilometers wide and 50 meters tall. Some researchers suggest that this could be our own face or what it once looked like. Perhaps our true homeland is Mars. What then does this structure on the surface of Mars represent? It could be either a natural formation or the ruins of artificial structures abandoned tens of thousands of years ago. Why not suggest that cosmic wanderers left these marks or beacons on different planets? Despite this, the hypothesis that the pyramids in Giza were built by extraterrestrials seems absurd to many. Perhaps the ancient Egyptians were not as primitive as we tend to think, and the theory of alien builders ignores their contribution to the construction of the Great Pyramid. August Thorncrest, a researcher of the Giza pyramids, notes that the Great Pyramid is the greatest monument in the history of humanity. However, it is strange that we have no records, no images, no blueprints describing its construction. The Egyptians left numerous written and painted testimonies of their lives, including childbirth, agriculture, construction, weaving, rituals, and sacrifices. But there is not a single word left about the pyramids of Giza. Richard Now, an expert in ecology, emphasizes that there is not a single hieroglyph in the Great Pyramid. He claims that it was built not by Egyptians, but by a people known as the Hyksos, or the Shepherd Kings, who came to Egypt and used their technologies for its construction. Experts from various fields of knowledge seem to be saying the same thing. Were the signs of extraterrestrial visitation to Earth obvious to humanity from the very beginning of its history? Did the Egyptians remain silent about the construction of the pyramids because they were already standing there when a new culture emerged in the Nile Valley? And does this mean that the mystery of the pyramids will never be solved by Earthlings? Meanwhile, the mysterious silent pyramids remain one of the most captivating mysteries in history. In December 1965, the residents of the town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, witnessed a strange phenomenon. An unusual craft flew across the sky and landed in a nearby forest. A team of locals immediately set out to search, but soon the town was surrounded by the military, who took the trophy and transported it in an unknown direction. In the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, the spirit of controversy has lingered for 30 years. Some residents claim that nothing unusual has ever happened in their area, while others insist that unidentified flying objects fly over them every day. The story of the strange metallic object that made an emergency landing in the nearby forest has led to endless gossip and stubborn silence. What are the residents of Kecksburg hiding? A military secret or a secret of the universe? To understand this, it is necessary to return to December 1965. Stan Gordon, a ufologist, recalls how the object appeared over the forests of Kecksburg at 4:47 in the evening. There are numerous witnesses who observed its fall, yet no one heard the sounds of the crash. All of them noticed a column of blue smoke rising above the forest, which attracted the attention of local residents who hurried to the scene. At the bottom of the forest ravine, they discovered a metallic object still smoking from its rapid passage through the Earth's atmosphere. James Romansky, one of the first to arrive at the site, describes, "I saw a large apparatus, something like an ear of corn. It had a quite dented bumper at the lower part of the body. I can't accurately describe its color, bronze, copper, steel, it's hard to determine." According to testimonies, soon trucks, soldiers, and equipment arrived at the location. "We found ourselves in a military situation. All around were jeeps, trucks, soldiers," continues Romansky. Two men in identical cloaks with short haircuts emerged from the forest. One of them, looking around, officially announced the closure of access to this area and ordered everyone to disperse to their homes. Stan Gordon, who interviewed eyewitnesses, found out that the object lay in the ravine for only a few hours before it was seized by the military. "They rolled in here with a tractor and two platforms. On the back was a lift with a cable and a loading conveyor. On the platform lay a tarpaulin cover that tightly wrapped around the bumper," recounts Gordon. Late in the evening, the tractor with the platform left Kecksburg. Later, it became known that the truck headed to the Lockford Air Force Base in the state of Ohio, and then to Dayton, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It is likely that the object was being monitored, and a special capture team was prepared for the operation. The mysterious object was taken away, and no one in Kecksburg saw it again. However, the most mysterious events occurred later. News program host John Murphy considered the incident in Kecksburg significant enough for a journalistic investigation and interviewed eyewitnesses. One of them recounted, "I saw this thing fall and burn." When asked if he saw the same thing, another witness confirmed, "Yes, of course, it was cigar-shaped, all on fire." However, it flew very steadily and then landed in the forest. There was something written on it, but it was illegible. Maybe it was hieroglyphs, say Japanese? The witness, not believing this, replied, "No, not at all. Are you sure it was a spacecraft?" "Absolutely." "It was bright," he assured. There were many soldiers around, and people did not know what was happening, which added to the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Eyewitnesses of the object's fall and its capture were later very frightened. John Murphy, one of the witnesses, shares his impressions. Soon after the incident, people who had willingly shared their observations suddenly began to refuse to mention their names. What happened in the hours following the eyewitness testimonies? That night, there were indeed many military personnel, and according to some, these individuals did not refuse to testify of their own volition. Perhaps they were simply forced to do so, or even paid for their silence. Kevin Randall, the author of the book The History of Crashes and Cover-Ups, claims that the official authorities deny any connection between UFOs and aliens, although they actually know of their existence. He emphasizes, the military knew they were dealing with a spacecraft. That is why they behaved as if they were at war. However, the question arises, where is the evidence that the craft was not launched by the military themselves? How can we know the truth about what happened on the 9th of December 1965? Perhaps we are searching for something that did not actually exist. Some residents of Kecksburg assert that there is no military secret here. Many reject the version of a crash over Kecksburg and believe that it was an ordinary meteorite. According to Jim Romansky, the meteorite version was suggested by the military 30 years ago. Someone from the locals asked what they thought it was, and the military without hesitation blurted out meteorite. In response, we just laughed because we knew it was pure nonsense, he recalls. Nevertheless, this version became the official one. Can we now, after 30 years of disagreements among the eyewitnesses themselves, find out where the ends and beginnings of this story are hidden? Since it is unknown in which museum the hastily removed meteorite is gathering dust, let us begin our investigation by sifting through the obviously false testimonies. True ufologists always try to find a logical explanation for mysterious phenomena and fantastic accounts from witnesses. First of all, let us discard the version about a hoax. That evening, something indeed occurred that raised the troops on alert. Their actions can only be explained by an event of national significance. The flight of a bright fireball was observed in Canada and several American states, including Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Thus, Kecksburg is merely the finale of this story. The testimonies of the eyewitnesses contradict each other. Can this object be considered man-made, or is it really a meteorite? A meteorite is a fragment of cosmic rock that travels at speeds of several thousand kilometers per hour and ignites from friction in the Earth's atmosphere. Typically, it moves in a straight trajectory, while the observed object changed course several times. People who witnessed it before its fall noted that it was flying slowly, as if it were planning. In any case, the memory of the object was not dictated by its supposedly supersonic flight. The automatic landing, the metallic body without joints and seams, the mysterious letters on the panel, the general alert, all these are real facts, so reminiscent of the fantasies of science fiction writers about invasions from other worlds. In Kecksburg, a number of eyewitnesses claim that the military appeared there literally a couple of hours after the fall of this alleged meteorite. Troops gradually gathered from various deployment locations, creating an atmosphere of tension. The organized capture of the meteorite became something completely new for the American Army, and it sounded almost like a joke. According to James Romansky, the troops also occupied several buildings. Jeeps, buses, and trucks were parked at the fire station, and people in uniform were around. One of the witnesses, being at the scene, even thought that a war had begun. At the entrance stood two guards with weapons, and when one of them asked to enter for a necessity, the guards merely mumbled in response that it was not allowed. The situation resembled a state of martial law, as if from a movie. There are numerous documents confirming the involvement of the United States in the capture of cosmic objects on its territory. In this context, two scenarios stand out that require the creation of special capture teams. The first is when a spacecraft from another side lands on the country's territory, and the second is when the object becomes an alien ship. Stan Gordon, an investigator of the incidents in Kecksburg, reviewed the reports from the radar service of the 662nd Squadron. These records confirm the existence of specially trained rapid response teams tasked with capturing unidentified flying objects. According to documents from the archives of the 662nd Squadron, at least several personnel from its ranks participated in the operation conducted that night in Kecksburg. However, no records of the nature of the actions were preserved in the archive, indicating the secret nature of the operation. The question remains open. Why is information about it still kept in classified folders? It is strange that the finding in Kecksburg has not lost its relevance over time. Something was found and taken somewhere, that is a fact. Everything else is still just speculation. After reports about the Russian satellite that suddenly began to descend, the matter took a new turn. Could the mystery of Kecksburg be merely an unfortunate experience of Soviet astronautics? Or is it, after all, the arrival of extraterrestrials? Which of these hypotheses can explain the mystery of the unidentified object that fell in Kecksburg? Richard, an expert on ecological issues, noted that in 1965, the USSR and the USA had equal chances of placing nuclear weapons in orbit, and each side was interested in the secrets of the other. When launching spent stages of space rockets, they usually burn up in the atmosphere, although in some cases, complete combustion does not occur. This practice has not changed to this day, and sometimes large components fall to Earth intact. There is a treaty under which countries are obliged to return fallen satellites that they launched. The Americans eagerly searched for the Soviet satellite Cosmos 96, which at that time represented cutting-edge technology. Special significance was attributed to the components of space rockets and nuclear weapons. Why, now that the Cold War has given way to friendlier relations, not part ways with the military secrets of those years? Could the find in Kecksburg have turned out to be a fragment of a Soviet rocket or even a detached warhead? First of all, space launch vehicles are not equipped with a soft landing system, which was observed in Kecksburg. Secondly, if such an event had occurred, there would be no intact windows left in the vicinity. Cosmos 96 was launched on the 23rd of November 1965, and its booster separated over Canada a few hours before the events in Kecksburg. Indeed, these two events have much in common, but only in that they occurred almost simultaneously. So, instead of Venus, the Soviet satellite ended up in Kecksburg, and the origin of the inscription on it is quite earthly. It was covered with circles, stars, and various squiggles. Perhaps these were hieroglyphs, say Japanese. However, as one of the researchers noted, he had never seen such hieroglyphs. The markings on Soviet satellites of those years puzzled those who were not familiar with the Russian language or Cyrillic script. Considering that the charred object in the atmosphere was far from new, the markings on it could have been distorted. One of the researchers, whose roots trace back to Kiev, recalls how he once asked his father to write something in their native languages, Ukrainian and Russian. He insists that Polish and Russian writing have nothing in common with what he saw with his own eyes. Nevertheless, most people have calmed down, believing that the spacecraft Cosmos 96 and the object that fell in Kecksburg are one and the same. However, Stan Gordon, a researcher, was clearly dissatisfied with this conclusion. He emphasizes that the satellite should have welding seams and instruments, and the photographs of the object he saw show that it is definitely not Cosmos 96. With 30 years of experience as a machinist, he adds, "I have reshaped a ton of metal. I know my stuff." It is hard to disagree with his remark, and he allows that it could have been an alien spacecraft. The object that fell in December 1965 in the forests of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, has become the subject of much debate. Researchers wonder if we can definitively ascertain that it was the uncontrolled Russian satellite Cosmos 96. Knowing that Cosmos 96 fell to Earth on the same day, many cannot imagine what it represented. The apparatus found in Kecksburg was significantly larger than the satellite Cosmos Venera. It had neither rivets, nor bolts, nor seams, and also lacked the external sensor antennas that distinguish most Soviet satellites. According to American intelligence, Cosmos 96 entered the Earth's atmosphere at 3:18 in the morning over Canada. Without seeing the object itself, it is impossible to make a definitive conclusion about its origin. Perhaps it is still stored in a hangar at a secret base, but that too remains in question. The Russian embassy does not have information about the fall of a Soviet satellite on Pennsylvania territory. And according to American government agencies, nothing like that could have happened to their orbital technology. In the U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book, which addresses UFO issues, the official version presented is that of a meteorite. Robert Blyston, a witness to the events, shares his opinion. All such reports can be immediately dismissed as a prank and an aviation accident, and then take a closer look at the remaining versions. For me, it is a UFO. He also adds that the most plausible version remains that of an artificial satellite, although he still has not seen anything like it. When asked if he believes it was aliens, he confidently replies, "Correct, anyone but Earthlings." The consequences continue, and until new information about the Kecksburg object appears, it remains only to speculate which version will become historical. Perhaps it really was an alien spacecraft. After all, something fell from the sky that day onto the forests of Kecksburg, and that something was quickly hidden by the military. While the truth about Kecksburg remains unknown, December 9th, 1965, will be one of the mysterious pages in the UFO diaries. Can we believe the accounts of UFO witnesses, or are we simply being led around by the nose? Many of the well-known stories about UFOs may turn out to be mere hoaxes. Today on the program, UFO Diaries, we seek an answer to the main question of ufology. Are UFOs real or a fabrication? Despite numerous warnings that this is just a spectacle, thousands of people believed in the reality of the events, and panic swept across the entire country. Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater proved that a story about aliens from other planets can be taken seriously, even if there is not a grain of truth in it. For their practical purposes, they invented a hoax that became iconic. Ufologist Pipples, author of the book Keeper of the Skies, notes that over the last 50 years, hundreds of people have come forward with various claims about UFOs, which, upon further investigation, turned out to be fakes. Among them were both photographs of unidentified objects and books on how to discern an analog on Venus using rubies. Sometimes storytellers provided physical evidence, but even that, upon examination, also proved to be false. Gavin Randall, author of the book The History of UFO Crashes, emphasizes that because of these pranksters, the credibility of genuine ufologists is diminished. While researchers attempt to establish the true origin of the UFO phenomenon, deceivers and crazies confuse people's minds, especially when they take their nonsense at face value. How does one manage to expose a fraud? What do ufologists rely on when determining the credibility of UFO information? First and foremost, it is essential to establish what motivates a particular report. Historian Curtis Pibbles recounts how one of the hoaxes was uncovered. In 1950, a man named Frank Scully wrote a book titled Behind Flying Saucers, in which he claimed that the American government had recovered a flying saucer that had crashed near the town of Aztec, New Mexico. Scully allegedly learned about this story from oil magnate Silas Newton. Newton offered Scully an intriguing tale, claiming that he had irrefutable evidence of the truth of his story. He described the astonishing properties of the disk, which had been tested by one of the country's leading scientists, concluding that it was not a fake. Scully, intrigued, agreed to write a story if it was true. However, it soon became clear that the object was actually ordinary aluminum, the material used to make frying pans and pots. The deception was uncovered by a well-known journalist named G.P. Can, who discovered that the flying saucer story had been fabricated to deceive investors in an oil field. Can recounted how they approached farmers and claimed they had an alien, then sold shares for $50 each and disappeared. They were subsequently charged with fraud. This story and its exposure illustrate the ongoing struggle of ufologists against various kinds of hoaxes. But which testimonies can be trusted? With so many eyewitnesses, the truth seems elusive. There are only individual accounts of what they supposedly saw. Does this mean that it is actually impossible to prove the existence of extraterrestrials, even in our age of active space exploration? With complete trust in astronauts, can we consider their reports of unidentified objects as irrefutable evidence? During the early flights, astronauts often spoke of observing UFOs. However, today ufologists tend to doubt the reliability of that information. In some cases, the testimonies of astronauts turned out to be simply ridiculous mistakes. A striking example can be found in the report of Jim McDivitt, a crew member of the Gemini 4 spacecraft. According to him, a huge spherical object from which a hand was protruding swam nearby the spacecraft. It was later proven that this object was the JME-4 booster rocket, which had entered the same orbit. It was a funny mistake, but nothing more. No alien ship. Stories about unidentified flying objects can arise from a vivid imagination or, at worst, from optical illusions. But what evidence can be considered irrefutable? Only that which can be seen with one's own eyes, or that which has been recorded by dozens of observers and is repeated night after night. However, even such evidence can be staged. In the small town of Gulf Breeze in Florida, known for reports of UFOs, airplanes are not uncommon, given the proximity of two Air Force bases. Nevertheless, the human eye has not yet become accustomed to such flying machines. Vicky Cooper Ecker, the editor of the magazine UFO, mentions a case when Wend Walter, working in the area, noticed a light in the windows. When he went outside, he saw an unidentified flying object. Fortunately, he had a camera, and he took clear pictures of objects in the shape of a lantern. In the following weeks, he managed to create an entire gallery of photographs of UFOs, which, according to ufologists, look quite convincing, if not extremely convincing. However, his story did not sit well with everyone. Bat Hopkins, a researcher of the abduction phenomenon, describes the situation when Ed was taken aboard a ship and then returned back to Earth. Little is known about what happened to him on board. According to him, he repeatedly entered into telepathic contact with aliens. The video recordings made by Ed himself contain fragments of his accounts of the abductions, some of which he remembers, while others were recovered under hypnosis and accompanied by painful experiences. The story is indeed impressive, but what about the specific facts? The best evidence may be Walter's photographs, but even here doubts arose. Some residents of Gulf Breeze confirmed his story, reporting their observations of a similar object, but unfortunately, none of them were able to provide equally clear photographs. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, a recognized physicist who worked for the government, examined the films and photographs, as well as the situation as a whole, and confirmed the authenticity of the images. This is a very authoritative expertise. Thus, the observations in Gulf Breeze could become the most credible fact of an encounter between Earthlings and aliens. However, does this not raise the question of fabrication? Opinions among ufologists are divided. Some believe Ed Walters' accounts, while others tend to doubt. Jerry Black, a ufologist, points out numerous inconsistencies in Ed's story. Mr. William Heiser, an independent photo analyst invited to analyze the photographs, determined that one of the photographs, number 19, is undoubtedly a frame overlay. It depicts a UFO hovering over the highway, while the truck, driven by Ed, is parked on the shoulder. The object is supposedly gliding over the road, illuminating it with beams from the underside of its body, yet the UFO is not reflected on the truck's hood. This raises doubts, as the glow should have reflected on the hood. Danny, Walter's son, has a friend named Tom who recently stated that he helped Ed process the photographs. After that, Walter began to deny many of the previously stated facts, which alarmed many of the earlier researchers. In my opinion, there is much that needs to be reconsidered here. In the house that previously belonged to Ed Walters, a model of a spaceship made of paper was discovered. It lay on the attic floor and bore the name of Ed Walters. This was a paper model, likely one of the prototypes from which he began. There were probably several models, and this is one of the earliest. At least it was not present in the photographs submitted by Ed Walters for public viewing. Many speculate that Walters left the model in the attic when experts arrived at his home. He did not destroy it or put it away in a closet, possibly out of fear that the researchers might peek into his bedroom in search of evidence. Instead, he decided to leave it gathering dust in the attic, hoping that no one would find it. Some commentators note that Walters displayed cleverness by faking all the photographs and then moving away, taking all his toys with him except for one piece of evidence. However, this seems illogical. The debates surrounding UFOs in Gulf Breeze have not subsided over the years, and the question of whether researchers are close to unraveling the mystery remains open. Truth or fiction? This story has yet to be confirmed by anything other than the testimonies of local residents. Some aspects of Walter's account have been deemed unusual and inexplicable by ufologists who have investigated the matter. Walters claimed that his photographs underwent 4 polygraph tests, although in reality only 2 of them were polygraphic, and all the tests were paid for by him. Experts in the field of polygraphy assert that the results of these tests cannot be considered valid. There are several arguments in favor of Walters. The model was apparently glued together from light copies that were lying around his home. Many people make photocopies of documents when moving, and someone could have collected them and glued together the model. It is strange that Walters would have disposed of his documents in such a manner. Opponents of Walters established that these were blueprints belonging to him, and the packet of blueprints was drawn up a couple of years after the photographs were taken. Thus, there is no connection between the model and the image of the UFO. Nevertheless, the question arises, why would Ed Walters need such a labor-intensive hoax? When he saw that researchers were examining his photographs, he likely decided to take a significant risk. The story gained national attention, and by that time, he realized that there was no turning back, which frightened him. At the same time, some believed that he simply wanted to have some fun. The debates surrounding Gulf Breeze continue, once again raising the question of evidence for the existence of UFOs that could convince even the most hardened skeptics. Some claim to have seen not only UFOs, but also the aliens themselves inside the craft, and that they have evidence of these accounts. Since the late 70s, an increasing number of people have reported being forcibly taken aboard a flying saucer, where horrific experiments were conducted on them. Despite hundreds of testimonies, there is almost no reliable evidence of the abduction of Earthlings by aliens among them. Researchers are trying to uncover the truth about these abductions. There are few more frightening aspects of the UFO phenomenon than reports of abductions. According to the testimonies of many victims, they were abducted by extraterrestrials, often right from their homes, and then transported to a ship where medical experiments were performed on them. How closely do these stories align with real events? Often, those who remember being taken from a car or bedroom were indeed missing, and even reported as such. There are many examples where the police were called, lengthy interrogations were conducted, and then the person suddenly reappeared at the location from which they had vanished. Dr. David Jacobs, a researcher of the abduction phenomenon, notes that many return with unusual marks on their bodies, scars, and bruises. Some scars are horrifying, measuring 6, 8, 12, and sometimes even 16 centimeters in length. The question arises, are these mysteriously appearing scars and instances of lost time real evidence of the abduction of Earthlings by beings from other planets? As for hoaxes, they are extremely rare in cases of abductions. The question of the perception of UFOs remains complex and multifaceted. Thomas Ballard from the Center for the Study of UFO Problems emphasizes that many people find it difficult to take UFOs seriously, let alone share their sightings. Public opinion often ridicules those who claim to have seen UFOs, labeling them as crazy or alcoholics. This stigmatization has existed for over 100 years. People who claim to have been abducted know that something strange and even frightening happened to them, but their memories of the events remain hazy. In some cases, they may consciously recall details of the incident, and then researchers resort to the method of hypnosis. This process can help uncover memory blocks where self-recollections are stored. Under hypnosis, a person can recount a detailed story of an abduction, including medical experiments conducted by strange beings. However, the question arises, does hypnosis confirm the reality of alien abductions, or can its results be interpreted differently? Hypnosis has an almost mystical reputation, and its methods are still contested in scientific circles. In the late 1970s, Professor of English Arvin Lawson and his students conducted an experiment with participants who were not connected to UFO abductions. Under hypnosis, they were to narrate a story of their abduction. The texts produced bore similarities in some aspects to well-known abduction stories of that time, leading Lawson to conclude that an ordinary person could recount an abduction even without actually experiencing it. This raises the question of the existence of a collective representation of alien abductions. Lawson asserts that anyone can tell a convincing story under hypnosis, and the authenticity of the information remains in question. This experiment calls into doubt the truthfulness of the testimonies of so-called abductees and can be interpreted as a play of a sick imagination correlated with collective representations of UFOs. Hypnosis cannot serve as an absolute measure of truthfulness, as memories under hypnosis may be a mixture of reality and imagination. Nevertheless, many ufologists place great importance on abduction testimonies, even if they are obtained under hypnosis. If it can be explained why people tell these stories without hypnosis, it may cause even the most hardened skeptics to ponder. Hypnosis is used because it indeed works. Some UFO researchers set high standards for the credibility of information, but the question remains, how much testimony survives such a harsh selection? When will we finally obtain irrefutable proof of the existence of extraterrestrials? If intelligent beings from other planets truly visit Earth, it is logical to assume that they surpass us in intellect and technology. This may also mean that they study us and interact with us while remaining invisible. The question remains open. Will we ever be able to prove or disprove the presence of extraterrestrial beings on Earth? Is there enough evidence of abductions to confirm their existence, or is something more convincing required? Perhaps it is necessary for a UFO to land on the lawn of the White House. It is unclear on what basis commonly accepted statements like, "If they exist, show them to us," are built. All the elements needed to create a comprehensive picture have already been gathered. There are samples of the material from which presumably the flying saucer is made. The landing sites of UFOs and any forms of contact between extraterrestrial craft and the environment are being investigated. There is still much that remains unexplored in this field. Furthermore, there are photographs that have been processed using computer technologies and other enhancement methods. These images are not forgeries. The problem is that it has not been possible to find the thread on which the unidentified object is suspended. There are video recordings, film reels, and eyewitness testimonies from credible individuals, as well as numerous reports. George Schnee, a journalist, emphasizes that they welcome any criticism from those who deny their research. He clarifies that it is not about skeptics, but rather that achieving a real refutation of the UFO phenomenon is impossible. The reason, he says, is simple. People have observed UFOs on all continents and in all cultures for hundreds of thousands of years. Millions of witnesses confirm this. If this were happening in a court of law, these testimonies would be sufficient to assert the truth. However, when it comes to UFOs, for some reason, it is preemptively assumed that it is a lie. Sean believes that 90% of all UFO sightings are misinterpretations of explainable phenomena. At the same time, 9 out of 10 genuine testimonies remain unknown. Nevertheless, even the available data looks astonishing. Reports continue to come in. The question of whether a person is alone in the universe has been discussed for centuries. The answer may appear in places where it is least expected. But until then, there will remain another unresolved question in the world: UFOs. Is it truth or fiction? And people's gazes will remain fixed on the skies in anticipation of new entries in the UFO diaries.